In the grand palaces of Malaysia's royal families, where tradition meets modernity and ancient customs blend seamlessly with contemporary life, there exists a story that has remained largely hidden from public view for over 3 decades. It's a tale woven with threads of love, sacrifice, heartbreak, and ultimately a mysterious disappearance that has left millions wondering about the fate of one of Malaysia's most beloved actresses who became royalty overnight, only to vanish from the spotlight as suddenly as she had entered it. This is the story of Julia Abdul Rais, a woman whose beauty captivated a nation, whose talent graced Malaysian cinema screens, and whose decision to marry into royalty would change not only her life, but the lives of her children forever. Today, more than 30 years after she first stepped into the royal limelight, questions still swirl around her absence from public life, her mysterious retreat from Malaysia, and the heartbreaking separation from the daughters she bore for the Sultan of Pahang. What drove this once celebrated actress to abandon everything she had worked for? Why did she disappear from royal events, including her own daughter's wedding? And where is Julia Rais now, as her daughters continue to live their lives in the Malaysian royal spotlight, while her mother remains a distant memory? These questions persist into 2025, with no definitive answers emerging from the veil of royal discretion. Julia's narrative is not just a personal saga, but a reflection of the tensions between individual ambition and institutional duty, between personal fulfillment and familial obligation in one of Southeast Asia's most enduring monarchies. To fully grasp the magnitude of Julia's sacrifice, one must delve into the cultural and historical context of Malaysian royalty. The 9 hereditary sultans of Malaysia form a unique constitutional monarchy, where each sultan serves a 5-year term as Yang di-Pertuan Agong, the King of Malaysia. Pahang, one of the largest states, boasts a rich lineage tracing back to the 15th century, with the Bintang dynasty emphasizing continuity through male heirs. Polygamy, permitted under Islamic law, has historically been a tool for securing succession, but it often comes at personal cost to the women involved. Julia's entry into this world was no exception, a fairy tale romance that unraveled into quiet exile.
To understand the magnitude of Julia's sacrifice, we must first appreciate what she gave up. Born Julia binti Abdul Rais on February 19, 1971 in Kota Baru, Kelantan, Julia was destined for greatness from an early age. Her unique heritage, being the daughter of Abdul Rais Yep, a successful Malaysian businessman and former board member of Sri Jaya Vehicles, and a British mother, endowed her with distinctive European features that would later make her one of Malaysia's most sought-after actresses. This mixed Malay-English ancestry was rare in the 1970s Malaysian entertainment scene, where homogeneity often prevailed, but it positioned Julia as an exotic yet relatable figure, bridging Eastern and Western aesthetics. Growing up in the upscale Damansara Jaya neighborhood of Kuala Lumpur with her father and stepmother, Zaidatul Laili at Lily Ibrahim, Julia was immersed in a blend of Malaysian and Western cultures. This cosmopolitan outlook would serve her well in her future career. She shared her childhood home with her late sister Zelina and 2 step-siblings, Mohammed Rafiza and Fazlin, fostering a close-knit family dynamic despite the complexities of blended households. Her familial ties extended further. She was the cousin of prominent politician Mohammed Nazri Abdul Aziz, a key figure in Malaysian politics, and a step-cousin to actress Ilyana Ibrahim. These connections, while not royal, placed her family within respected business and political circles, providing a foundation of stability and influence that would later facilitate her improbable leap into royalty. Julia's entry into the entertainment industry began in the late 1980s, when she was just a teenager, navigating the burgeoning Malaysian film and television landscape. At a time when Malay cinema was gaining momentum post-independence, influenced by Bollywood and local theater traditions, Julia's fresh face and poise made her an instant standout. She started with television commercials for major brands like Procter & Gamble and Rejoice shampoo, where her natural beauty, radiant smile, and effortless charisma immediately caught the attention of casting directors and audiences alike. Her exotic looks, high cheekbones, fair complexion, and expressive green-tinged eyes combined Malaysian warmth with European elegance, making her a rarity in an industry where such diversity was prized but underrepresented. Her breakthrough arrived in 1990 with her debut film Isabella, a Malaysia-Indonesia joint venture production that showcased not only her acting abilities, but also her commanding screen presence. Directed by Marwan Al-Katir, the film thrust Julia into the spotlight as the titular character, a role that demanded both vulnerability and strength, mirroring the complexities of her future life. Critics praised her debut for its authenticity, noting how she infused the character with a subtle cultural fusion that resonated across borders. Following this success, she appeared in several notable films that would cement her reputation as one of the brightest stars of her generation, a golden era for Malaysian cinema, marked by increasing state support and international collaborations. In Hati, Bukan, Kristal, 1990, she portrayed Nina, a tenacious journalist unraveling personal and professional dilemmas, in a role that demonstrated her range as an actress far beyond mere physical allure. The film's exploration of emotional fragility and societal pressures earned it widespread acclaim, and Julia's nuanced performance, balancing empathy with resolve, drew comparisons to emerging regional talents. She followed this with Mira Adora, 1990, where she embodied the titular character, a woman grappling with love and loss in a conservative society, further showcasing her ability to convey quiet intensity. That same year, Driving School, 1990, a lighthearted comedy, saw her as Sally, a free-spirited student navigating mishaps and romance, revealing her comedic timing and versatility across genres. These roles highlighted Julia's chameleon-like adaptability, a trait honed from her bilingual upbringing and exposure to diverse storytelling forms. Her talent was officially recognized at the 9th Malaysian Film Festival in 1991, where she clinched the prestigious Bintang Harapan, Most Promising Star Award, and contributed to the Best Film Award for Hati Bukan Kristal. Additionally, she received a nomination for Best Actress for Mira Adora, underscoring her meteoric rise. Her final major film role came in 1992 with Suci Dalam Debu, where she played Tengku Aziz, a character torn between purity and temptation in a tale of moral redemption. Many consider this her finest work, with reviewers lauding her portrayal's depth and the way it foreshadowed the personal sacrifices she would soon make in real life. By 1991, at just 20 years old, Julia Rais was at the pinnacle of her career. She was beloved by audiences across Malaysia and Southeast Asia, had won major awards, and was being offered leading roles in increasingly prestigious productions. Film critics praised her natural acting ability, her magnetic screen presence, and her potential to become an international star. Many in the industry believe she could have bridged Malaysian cinema with international markets, potentially becoming the first Malaysian actress to gain worldwide recognition, akin to how Priyanka Chopra later transcended Bollywood. Directors lined up for collaborations, and endorsements poured in, painting a future of global red carpets and crossover hits. But fate, as it often does in such tales, had other plans for Julia Rais. Her ascending career was about to take a dramatic turn that would change everything, pulling her from the flashing lights of studios into the shadowed grandeur of palaces. This pivot was not merely personal, but emblematic of the broader societal shifts in the 1990s Malaysia, where economic liberalization under Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad opened doors for ambitious women like Julia, only for traditional structures to reclaim them.
The story of how Julia Rais came to the attention of the then Tengku Mahkota, Crown Prince Abdullah of Pahang, reads like something out of a fairy tale. Yet it would ultimately prove to be more complex and tragic than any cinema romance scripted for the silver screen. In 1990, while Julia was establishing herself as one of Malaysia's premier actresses, Tengku Abdullah was already married to his first wife, Tunku Azizah Amina Maimuna Iskandaria, the daughter of the late Sultan Iskandar of Johor. Their marriage in 1986 had been a significant political alliance, uniting two of Malaysia's most prominent royal families, and strengthening ties between the Pahang and Johor sultanates in a federation where interstate relations could influence national stability. Tunku Azizah was everything a royal consort should be, well-educated at the University of Wales, from noble lineage, and deeply respected in royal circles for her poise and charitable work. However, by 1991, 5 years into their marriage, the couple faced a challenge that would have profound implications for the royal succession. They had been unable to produce an heir. In traditional Malay royal culture, the production of male heirs is not merely a personal matter, but a constitutional necessity, as the stability and continuity of the royal house depend on a clear line of succession. The pressure on royal couples to produce children, particularly sons, is immense, echoing centuries-old practices rooted in Islamic and adat, or customary law traditions. When such expectations are not met, it can create both personal anguish and political complications, with whispers in courtly circles threatening the family's prestige. The situation became more desperate in 1990, when Tunku Azizah finally became pregnant, bringing hope to the entire royal family and the people of Pahang, who viewed the succession as intertwined with state prosperity. However, tragedy struck when the pregnancy ended in the loss of the baby, creating profound grief for both the Sultan, Sultan Ahmad Shah, and his wife. This loss was not just a private sorrow, but a public concern, as the royal succession remained uncertain, fueling speculation about alternative arrangements to secure the throne. It was during this difficult period that Tengku Abdullah, while watching television one evening in the opulent Istana Abu Bakar, or perhaps during a private screening, saw Julia Rice in one of her films. The exact movie that caught his attention has been the subject of much speculation among royal watchers, but sources suggest it was either Hati Bukan, Kristal, or Mira Idora, both of which showcased Julia's beauty, intelligence, and emotional depth to their fullest. The future sultan was immediately captivated, not just by her extraordinary beauty, those striking features that had made her a pin-up in magazines, but by her screen presence and the quiet intelligence she conveyed in her performances. In an era before streaming, such chance encounters with media could spark profound connections, especially for a prince bound by duty.
Unlike many royal attractions that might be based solely on physical beauty, those close to the royal family have suggested that Tengku Abdullah was also impressed by Julia's background and character. Her mixed heritage gave her an international sophistication that aligned with Malaysia's Vision 2020 aspirations for global integration. Her family was respectable and well-connected in Malaysian business circles through her father's ventures, and her success as an actress demonstrated intelligence, ambition, and the ability to handle public attention, all qualities that would be invaluable in a royal consort navigating media and protocol. Moreover, her adherence to Sunni Islam and emerging spiritual inclinations promised compatibility with the devout Pahang court. Under Islamic law, which governs royal marriages in Malaysia as per the Sharia courts, a man is permitted to have up to 4 wives, provided he can treat them equally in terms of affection, time, and provision, a principle from Surah An-Nisa that has been invoked in royal contexts for centuries. This provision had historically been used by various Malaysian royal families when circumstances required it, particularly in cases where the succession needed to be secured, as seen in the polygamous unions of Sultans and Negeri Sembilan and Perak. Tengku Abdullah's decision to consider a second marriage was therefore not unprecedented, though it was still a significant step that would require careful consideration of both Islamic law and royal protocol, including consultations with the Majlis Agama Islam Pahang. The courtship, such as it was, appears to have been relatively brief and conducted with the utmost discretion, befitting the era's conservative media landscape. Given the significant difference in their social positions, she was a commoner, albeit a successful one, while he was heir to one of Malaysia's most important sultanates, any relationship had to be handled with extreme care to avoid scandal or political complications that could ripple through the Barisan Nasional coalition.
Those familiar with royal protocols suggest that the initial approaches were likely made through intermediaries, possibly including Julia's cousin Mohammed Nasri Abdul Aziz, who held political positions and was well-versed in royal circles during his time as a minister. The negotiations would have covered not just the personal aspects of the marriage, compatibility, consent, and emotional bonds, but also the practical considerations: Julia's burgeoning career, her public image as a symbol of modern Malaysian womanhood, the impact on the royal family's reputation amid growing calls for transparency, and the expectations that would be placed on her as a royal consort, including relinquishing her professional life.
For Julia, the decision to entertain the Sultan's interest must have been extraordinarily difficult, a crossroads between the allure of fame and the gravity of legacy. At just 20 years old, she was at the height of her career, with opportunities for even greater success stretching before her like an unspooling film reel. She had worked tirelessly to establish herself in a competitive industry, dominated by nepotism and typecasting, finally achieving the recognition and financial independence she had dreamed of since her Damansara days. The choice between continuing her ascending trajectory, perhaps starring in international co-productions or launching a production company, and entering the restrictive world of royal life would have required her to weigh her personal ambitions against the unprecedented opportunity to become part of Malaysia's royal hierarchy, a status that promised security but demanded subservience. The royal encounter unfolded against the backdrop of Malaysia's economic boom, where young women like Julia symbolized progress, yet traditional institutions like the monarchy reminded them of enduring hierarchies. Letters, discreet meetings in neutral venues like Fraser's Hill, and family endorsements likely paved the way, culminating in a union that blended cinematic romance with dynastic strategy. The wedding that changed everything. On a quiet day in 1991, in the serene hill station of Fraser's Hill, a colonial-era retreat with misty peaks and Tudor-style bungalows, a ceremony took place that would forever alter the trajectory of not one, but multiple lives. Julia Abdul Rais, the 20-year-old actress at the pinnacle of her career, became the second wife of Tengku Abdullah's Sultan Ahmad Shah, the 32-year-old heir to the Pahang throne, in a private Islamic ceremony witnessed only by close friends and family members. The exact date remains shrouded in palace archives, but reports place it in the spring, a season of renewal that belied the profound shifts ahead. The choice of Fraser's Hill as the venue was significant in several ways, reflecting both practicality and symbolism. The cool, misty hill station, elevated above the humid lowlands and far from prying eyes in Kuala Lumpur, provided the privacy that such a sensitive ceremony required. Unlike the grand public ceremonies typically associated with royal weddings, think the lavish 1986 union of Abdullah and Tunku Azizah, attended by thousands, this was deliberately kept intimate to avoid the media scrutiny that might have complicated an already delicate situation in an era when tabloids like Eutasan Malaysia were eager for royal gossip. The marriage was conducted according to Islamic rites, with Tengku Abdullah himself reportedly solemnizing the union, a detail that underscores both the private nature of the ceremony and the care taken to ensure its religious legitimacy under the Akad Nikah tradition. This wasn't merely a civil union, but a sacred covenant under Islamic law, complete with the Ijab Kabul, offer and acceptance, and Walima, feast, albeit scaled down. It gave Julia full rights as a wife, including mahar provisions, and ensured that any children born of the union would have legitimate claims to royal status and succession rights, a crucial assurance in Pahang's agnatic primogeniture system.
For Julia, the wedding day must have been a whirlwind of emotions, a montage of joy and trepidation worthy of her film career. She was not just marrying a man she had come to care for deeply, drawn to his quiet dignity and shared values, but was also stepping into a world that would require her to completely reinvent herself. Gone would be the freedom of her acting career, the spontaneity of red carpet premieres, and the independence she had cultivated as a successful, professional woman earning her own accolades. In its place would come the structured, hierarchical world of royal protocol, where every action, from attire to address, would be scrutinized, and every decision would need to consider not just personal desires, but royal responsibilities to the rakyat, people of Pahang. The guests at the intimate ceremony included members of both families, with representatives from the Pahang royal household ensuring that all protocols were observed, from the recitation of Doa Salamat to the exchange of gifts, and that the union would be recognized within royal circles across the Federation. The presence of close friends from Julia's acting career, perhaps a director or co-star who had become confidants, marked the poignant end of one chapter of her life and the beginning of another that would be far more constrained and private. Whispers among attendees recalled Julia's composure, her traditional baju kurung adapted with subtle Western flair, a nod to her heritage. Upon her marriage, Julia was bestowed with the honorific title of Che Puan, equivalent to lady in English, indicating her status as a royal consort who was not of royal blood herself. She became known as Yang Amat Berbahagia Che Puan Julia Rais, a title that reflected both respect for her new position and acknowledgement of her commoner origins, a distinction that would linger like a subtle shadow in courtly interactions. The wedding, while small, sent ripples throughout Malaysian society and the entertainment industry, akin to a plot twist in one of Julia's own films. Her fans, who had idolized her as the embodiment of aspirational glamour, were shocked to learn that their beloved actress had not only married, but had done so into royalty. Social pages in the New Straits Times buzzed with speculation, hailing it as a modern Cinderella story while mourning the loss of her on-screen presence. The Malaysian film industry, still recovering from the 1980s ban on certain genres, lost one of its brightest stars virtually overnight, as royal protocol forbade consorts from continuing professional careers that might invite scandal or distract from duties. Movie executives who had been planning projects around her talents, sequels to Isabella, perhaps a dramatic biopic, found themselves having to completely restructure their productions, scrambling for replacements in a talent pool thinned by emigration to Singapore's media hub.
News of the marriage was reported in local media with measured restraint, with the New Straits Times covering the story and noting the couple's plans to hold a reception in Kuala Lumpur soon after the ceremony, though details were scant to preserve decorum. However, this reception, if it occurred as planned, was kept equally private, reflecting the family's desire to manage the transition carefully and avoid any controversies that might arise from the unusual circumstances of the marriage. A commoner actress entering a polygamous royal union at a time when women's rights groups were beginning to question such traditions. For Tunku Azizah, the first wife, the wedding represented a complex emotional and practical challenge, layered with the resilience she would later demonstrate as queen. While Islamic law permitted her husband's second marriage, and while she may have intellectually understood the pressures for producing an heir as a duty to the Ummah community, the reality of sharing her husband with another woman, particularly one as young, beautiful, and publicly adored as Julia, must have been profoundly difficult. Reports from the Times suggest Tunku Azizah's grace in acceptance, perhaps drawing on her own royal upbringing to prioritize dynasty over personal sentiment. But private letters or diaries, if they exist, might reveal the inner turmoil of navigating fardu kifaya, communal obligation, versus personal qalb, heart. The immediate aftermath of the wedding saw Julia withdrawing completely from public life, a vanishing act more abrupt than any in her films. Film projects that had been in development were politely declined or reassigned. Promotional appearances for ongoing releases were curtailed by palace advisors, and the actress who had been a regular fixture in Malaysian entertainment media, gracing covers of Dewan Siswa and interviews on RTM, simply vanished from view. This withdrawal was not gradual, but immediate and complete, suggesting that the royal family had very clear expectations about how royal wives should conduct themselves, aligned with the Istiadat Diraja Pahang, royal customs. Within the royal household at Istana Manggis, or the sprawling Pekan Palace complex, Julia had to learn not just the protocols and traditions that governed royal behavior, etiquette classes on salam, greetings, attire codes for Silat al-Rahim, family ties, but also how to navigate the complex relationships between the first and second wives, the extended royal family, including Tengku Ibrahim Alam Shah, Abdullah's brother, and the various courtiers and officials who managed royal affairs, like the Ketua Istana. Her mixed heritage, which had been an advantage in her entertainment career as a symbol of multiculturalism, now had to be carefully managed to ensure it didn't create any complications within the traditionally Malay royal hierarchy, where purity of bloodlines was prized. The wedding marked not just the beginning of Julia's royal life, but also the effective end of her individual identity as known by the Malaysian public. From that day forward, she would be defined not by her talents, achievements, or personality that had won awards, but by her relationship to the royal family and her ability to fulfill the expectations placed upon her as a royal wife and hopefully mother. This transformation, while outwardly seamless, sowed seeds of the isolation that would later bloom into exile.
The first years of Julia's marriage to Tengku Abdullah were marked by both the promise of her new role and the intense pressure that came with royal expectations, a delicate balance between honeymoon idealism and dynastic reality. As the second wife of the heir to the Pahang throne, Julia was expected to fulfill specific duties that went far beyond those of an ordinary wife, duties etched in the unwritten constitution of Malay royalty. Chief among these was the expectation that she would quickly produce children, particularly male heirs, to secure the royal succession, a burden that echoed the historical imperatives of sultans like Abdul Jalil Shah III, who faced deposition for lack of issue. The initial period following her marriage appeared to be promising, a chapter of adaptation and optimism. Julia adapted to royal life with the same grace and intelligence that had made her successful as an actress, earning quiet praise from palace insiders. She was described as respectful toward royal protocols, deferent to her husband's first wife in hierarchical seating and decision-making, and seemingly comfortable with the restrictions that royal life imposed upon her previous freedoms of schedule and expression. Her days now revolved around majlis, charitable visitations to orphanages in Kuantan, and studies in Islamic fiqh to deepen her faith, a practice that aligned with Pahang's conservative bent. Unlike her vibrant public persona as an actress, where she could improvise lines or charm interviewers, Julia's royal life was characterized by discretion and privacy, a stark contrast to the spotlight she once courted. She made very few public appearances, limited to state functions like Hari Raya open houses, and when she did, she comported herself with the dignity and reserve expected of a Che Puan, her attire a modest kabaya labu in earthy tones symbolizing Pahang's forests. Her mixed heritage, rather than being celebrated as exotic as it had been in her entertainment career, was now something to be carefully managed within the context of Malay royal tradition, with advisors suggesting she emphasize her Malay roots in public narratives to assuage purists. The relationship between Julia and Tunku Azizah during these early years has been the subject of much speculation, colored by the polygamous dynamics common in Islamic royal history. According to some sources, the two women initially maintained a cordial relationship, bound by mutual respect and the practical necessities of their shared situation, joint appearances at family iftars, collaborative charity drives. Tunku Azizah, with her Jor pedigree, may have viewed Julia as a necessary ally in the quest for heirs, their conversations perhaps touching on shared experiences of protocol's weight. However, others suggest that tensions were present from the beginning, as the natural jealousies and competitions inherent in polygamous relationships began to manifest subtly over allocations of time with Abdullah or prominence in palace announcements. Julia's primary residence during this period was within the royal compound in Pekan, where she had her own quarters, elegant pavilions with teak furnishings and views of the Pahang River, appropriate to her status as second wife. The living arrangements were designed to provide her with privacy and dignity while maintaining the hierarchical structure that placed Tunku Azizah as the senior wife, with her apartments closer to the main Durbar hall. These arrangements, while practical and in line with Sharia equity, may have contributed to Julia's growing sense of isolation from the world she had known as an actress, where collaboration and camaraderie defined daily life. The pressure to produce children was immense and constant, a ticking clock in the palace corridors. In royal families, pregnancy announcements are not just personal joy, but matters of state significance, proclaimed via official gazettes and celebrated with kinduris, or feasts. Every month that passed without news of pregnancy was noted not just by the royal family, but by courtiers, officials tracking lineage charts, and eventually the public, who were naturally interested in the continuation of their royal lineage through folklore and media snippets. Julia, aware of the stakes, reportedly embraced fertility rituals and medical consultations discreetly, her actress's discipline turning inward.
During this period, Julia had to navigate not just her relationship with her husband, who balanced duties as regent during his father's absences, and his first wife, but also the complex web of royal relatives, palace officials, and political figures who surrounded the Pahang royal family. Her commoner background, while not unprecedented in Malaysian royal marriages, as seen with commoners wedding into Perak's line, meant that she lacked the natural understanding of royal hierarchies and protocols that someone born into nobility would have possessed. Lessons in Bahasa Istana, palace language, genealogy recitals, and even culinary customs, Pahang's riverfish specialties, became her new script. The isolation of royal life must have been particularly challenging for someone who had been accustomed to the collaborative, creative environment of film production, where once she had been surrounded by directors barking cues, fellow actors sharing laughs over Tatarek, and crews who valued her contributions and sought her input on scenes. She now found herself in a world where her opinions were rarely solicited and her role was primarily defined by her relationship to others rather than her individual merits. The transition from set trailers to palace anteroom felt like a fade to black. Palace life also meant adherence to strict schedules and protocols that governed everything from mealtimes, halal feasts at precise hours, to social interactions, where even a misplaced smile could be interpreted as familiarity. The spontaneity that had characterized her life as an actress, impromptu photo shoots or late-night script reads, was replaced by carefully orchestrated routines designed to maintain royal dignity and avoid any situations that might reflect poorly on the royal family, especially amid the 1990s rising Islamist sentiments. Despite these challenges, Julia appeared to embrace her new role with determination, her performer's resilience shining through. She studied Islamic practices more intensively, as befitted her position in a Muslim royal family, delving into tafsir, Quranic exegesis, and hadith collections that emphasized sabr, patience. Later, she became a serious student of Islamic spirituality, emerging as a follower of Yasmin Mogahed, the American Palestinian author whose works on reclaiming the self through faith would become a lifeline. Mogahed's teachings on tawakkul, reliance on God, and the illusions of worldly attachments may have provided her with some comfort and guidance during the difficult transition from her former life to her new royal existence, framing her sacrifices as acts of ibadah, worship. The early years of her marriage also required Julia to completely reconstruct her sense of identity, a process akin to method acting for an indefinite run. Where once she had been Julia Rice, the actress, known for her beauty, talent, and screen presence that lit up billboards from Penang to Jakarta, she now had to become Che Puan Julia, defined by her relationships, her discretion, and her ability to fulfill royal expectations without a single misstep. This transformation, while outwardly successful in maintaining palace harmony, may have created internal conflicts, doubts about lost dreams, yearnings for the applause, that would later contribute to her eventual withdrawal from royal life entirely. Friends from her film days recall hushed phone calls where she confessed the loneliness, her voice a whisper against the echo of marble halls. As the months passed and still no pregnancy was announced, the pressure only intensified, a gathering storm in the otherwise serene Pahang court. Royal watchers in society columns began to speculate about the success of the second marriage, questioning if the union born of necessity could yield the desired fruit. Palace insiders started to whisper about whether Julia would be able to fulfill the primary purpose for which she had been brought into the royal family, There murmurs a subtle undercurrent to the silences at family majlis. Just over a year after her marriage, Julia's life took on new meaning and purpose when she gave birth to her first child on November 11, 1992. The arrival of Tengku Putri Raja Tengku Putri Iman Afzan brought immense joy to the royal family and temporarily relieved the pressure that had been building around Julia's ability to produce heirs. While the royal family would have preferred a male heir to directly secure the throne, the birth of a healthy daughter was still cause for celebration, a burst of light in the succession's shadow, and demonstrated that Julia could indeed fulfill her primary role as mother to the next generation of Pahang royalty. Official announcements from Istana Pekan proclaimed the news with traditional fanfare, cannon salutes and doa salamat recitals, heralding Tengku Iman as a symbol of continuity. The birth of Tengku Iman was significant in multiple ways, beyond the immediate relief it provided. It legitimized Julia's position within the royal family, proving her fertility and value in dynastic terms, and gave her a new identity as a royal mother, shifting her from consort to progenitor. The young princess was born into a life of privilege and expectations, with her royal status assured from birth under the Perlembagaan Pahang. Palace announcements celebrated the arrival with subdued ceremonies, private akikah, haircutting ritual, and gifts from the extended Bendahara clan, welcoming the newest member with appropriate rituals that blended Islam and Adat, such as the placement of Siri Penang, betel offerings for blessings. For Julia, motherhood brought both profound joy and additional responsibilities, a role she embraced with the dedication of a star, preparing for her most important scene. Royal children are not raised like ordinary children. Their education, behavior, and development are matters of state concern, overseen by tutors in everything from Arabic recitations to equestrian skills. From her earliest days, Tengku Iman would be expected to exemplify royal grace and dignity, and Julia found herself responsible not just for nurturing a daughter, changing diapers in silk-lined nurseries, but for preparing a future member of the royal family, instilling values of adab, etiquette, and taqwa, God consciousness. The success of her first pregnancy led to rapid subsequent pregnancies, a testament to Julia's health and the palace's medical support. On October 1, 1993, she gave birth to her second daughter, Tengku Putri Raja Tengku Putri Ilisha Amira, followed by her third, Tengku Putri Raja Tengku Putri Ilyana Alia, on April 20, 1997. The arrival of three daughters in relatively quick succession seemed to establish Julia firmly in her role as a royal mother and appeared to secure her position within the Pahang royal family, at least temporarily. Each birth was celebrated within royal circles, though the festivities were notably more subdued than they might have been for male heirs. Intimate walima with ulama blessings rather than grand processions, reflecting the gender preferences in succession law. The three princesses were beautiful children who inherited their mother's striking features, high cheekbones, luminous skin, and their father's royal bearing, a genetic fusion that turned heads at family gatherings. Palace photographs from this period, rare as they are, showed Julia as a devoted mother, cradling her infants with a tenderness that softened her regal attire, appearing comfortable and content in her maternal role amidst the scent of oud incense and the lullabies of makbidan, traditional midwives. During this period, Julia seemed to have found her place within the royal hierarchy, a fragile equilibrium. She had successfully adapted to royal protocols, from hosting teas for the wives of state assemblymen to participating in the annual Permaisuri's charity bazaars, maintained appropriate relationships with the extended royal family, including overtures to Tunku Azizah's circle, and most importantly, had produced three healthy children who would carry on the Pahang royal lineage, even if indirectly. Her daughters were being raised with all the privileges and educational opportunities befitting their royal status: private tutors in multiple languages, excursions to Cameron Highlands for nature studies. And Julia appeared to be settling into a quiet royal domesticity, punctuated by spiritual retreats. The three princesses were remarkable children who showed early signs of the intelligence and grace that would later make them prominent figures in Malaysian royal circles. Tengku Iman, as the eldest, displayed particular promise even as a toddler, her curiosity evident in grasping at family heirlooms. She would later become known for her advocacy work in mental health awareness, a field close to the heart in a nation grappling with post-pandemic stresses.
Her birth weight, health, and early development were all closely monitored by palace physicians versed in both Western and traditional Unani medicine, as befitted a child of royal blood, with vaccinations and milestones charted like state reports. Tengku Ilisha Amira, the middle daughter, inherited perhaps the strongest resemblance to her mother, with the same striking features that had made Julia famous: expressive eyes and a photogenic pose. Even as a young child, she displayed the kind of innate charm that had characterized her mother's screen presence, posing instinctively for family portraits. However, unlike her mother, she would grow up entirely within the protective confines of royal life, never knowing the independence and public recognition that Julia had experienced in her entertainment career, shielded from paparazzi by palace gates and security. The youngest daughter, Tengku Ilyana Alia, completed what appeared to be Julia's successful establishment of herself as a royal mother. Born in 1997 amid the Asian financial crisis's early tremors, she represented the culmination of Julia's fertility and her contribution to the royal lineage, her cries echoing in chambers adorned with batik motifs. All three daughters were healthy, intelligent, and beautiful, reflecting well on both their parents and the royal family as a whole, their baptisms Tahlil ceremonies drawing quiet well wishes from the Ummah. However, even during these years of apparent success and contentment, there were subtle signs that all was not entirely well in Julia's royal life, like faint cracks in a porcelain vase. Palace observers noted that she seemed increasingly withdrawn, making fewer public appearances even by the already limited standards expected of royal wives, preferring solitude in her sarau prayer room. Her interactions with the extended royal family became more formal and less frequent, limited to obligatory selamatan Thanksgiving feasts, and she appeared to be spending more time in private study and religious contemplation, poring over Mogahed's Reclaim Your Heart.
The relationship between Julia and Tunku Azizah during this period also began to show signs of strain as the first wife's own fertility journey progressed. While Tunku Azizah would eventually go on to have children of her own, ultimately bearing 3 sons, including the current Tengku Mahkota Tengku Hassanal Ibrahim and 2 daughters with Sultan Abdullah, the early years saw Julia as the more fertile wife, which may have created uncomfortable dynamics within the royal household, whispers of imbalance in the kist, justice of polygamy. Moreover, while Julia had successfully produced 3 children, the fact that none were male heirs may have disappointed some within the royal family, who had hoped that the second marriage would quickly produce the male succession that had been the original motivation for the polygamous arrangement. Royal succession in Malaysia generally follows male primogeniture, meaning that while Julia's daughters were certainly valued members of the royal family, entitled to titles and dowries, they would not be in direct line for the Pahang throne, their roles more ceremonial than constitutional. During the late 1990s, as her youngest daughter grew from infant to toddler amid the dot-com bubble's optimism, Julia began to exhibit behaviors that would later be seen as precursors to her eventual withdrawal from royal life entirely. She became more intensely religious, spending increasing amounts of time in prayer and Islamic study, her surah recitations a solace in the quiet hours. She also began to express interest in returning to the United Kingdom, where her mother lived, ostensibly for visits to reconnect with her English roots, but with increasing frequency and duration, trips that offered breaths of anonymity. The joy that had characterized the births of her daughters began to be overshadowed by what appears to have been a growing sense of isolation and perhaps disillusionment with royal life. While she had successfully adapted to royal protocols and expectations, the cost of that adaptation, the suppression of her creative spirit, the constant deference, may have been higher than initially apparent, a quiet erosion like tides on Pahang shores.